the 7th of March 1945. Remagen, Rhine River, Germany. Combat Command B, 9th Armored Division, Brigadier General William M. Hoge commanding. Task Force Engerman on point. Wind over the water, dust, diesel, and the hard clatter of tracks. Lieutenant Colonel Leonard Engerman's column drops off the ridge, and the black lattice of the Ludendorff Bridge appears where everyone expected only ruins. Engines idle. Men lean out of hatches. For a breath, the front goes quiet. C Troop, 89th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron noses. M8 armoured cars toward the western ramp. Behind them move the Shermans of the 14th Tank Battalion and the half-tracks of Company A, 27th Armoured Infantry Battalion. Captain Karl Timmermann gets the order that has hovered over maps for months: if the bridge stands, seize it now. Lieutenant Hugh Mott from Company B, 9th Armoured Engineer Battalion checks his pliers and cutters, the kit that will matter more than... Across the river, German command is a tangle. Major Hans Scheller, newly responsible for the bridge area, tries to impose order, while Captain Willy Bratge, a Luftwaffe officer acting as combat commander, demands demolition authority. Captain Karl Friesenhahn, the engineer, hunts for a clean firing circuit. Paper signatures, conflicting chains, minutes lost, a bureaucracy trying to stop a river. At the ramp, the Americans take fire from the east bank. Hoge arrives and decides in seconds. No flourish, just procedure. Timmermann splits Company A. One element to clear the deck, one to push for the far shore. Riflemen shoot into the tower loopholes, while engineers slide along girders, fingers on primer cord, tossing Donnerite bundles into the Rhine. A blast thumps underfoot, the span shivers, but the main charges do not go. The bridge holds. Sergeant Alexander Drabik breaks into a full run over the planking, the first enlisted man to reach the east bank. Timmermann is the first officer across. In their wake, Mott leads S, Sergeant John A. Reynolds and Sergeant Eugene Dorland, to the live switch boxes, cutting and ripping until the detonators are dead metal. On the heights of Epernay, American fire hunts the flak guns that had pinned the approaches minutes before. The cadence of battle changes, fewer tracers coming back, more boots thumping forward. Tanks ease onto the span, the deck groaning but taking the load. Infantry fans through the east ramp and into the rail tunnel, herding dazed prisoners and civilians apart. Radios crackle up the chain bridge, intact east bank, seized engineers at work. Behind them, columns are already rerouting a river that had been a wall, is now a road. In headquarters farther east, German officers stare at the map line that was supposed to hold and understand the arithmetic. With a Rhine bridgehead here, the Ruhr can be turned. The sentence begins to form in quiet rooms: the war is over. Night climbs over the Rhine and the lattice turns black against a sky scratched by tracers. Engineers fan out along the approaches with lanterns hooded, feeling for flecks in the timbers, listening for the telltale hiss of a live line. Smoke generators cough to life on the west bank, and a grey curtain drifts across the span. The river smells of wet rust and powder. Radios pass the same clipped message up and down the column bridge intact. East ramp held. Push traffic. On the far bank, the tunnel under Epernay becomes a bottleneck of orders and fear. Field phones ring, lines die, runners sprint back out into the smoke. Some detachments pull north along the tracks, others try to climb the path up the basalt shoulder to sight guns. A few men argue for a final shot at the demolition boxes, but the control lines have been gnawed by artillery and engineer pliers. The chance is gone, and everybody in the tunnel knows it. Truck after truck growls onto the deck in low gear. A half-track slips where the ramp was blasted and is dragged forward by a tank like a hooked fish. The deck talks back with a deep groan, then settles. A platoon peels off to the right and clears the first houses on the east bank room by room. Prisoners come out stunned, many without belts or helmets, hands shaking at their shoulders. The first American aidmen cross with satchels, slapping their thighs, looking for the men who fell and did not get up. High overhead, the river draws attention like a magnet. Searchlights probe the smoke. Engines wind up across the sky. The first bombs fall long into the fields. Then the calibration tightens and bursts walk closer to the black trestle. The bridge answers with its own teeth. Browning heavy machine guns rattle from sandbagged nests, and the quick hammer of 40mm mounts punches at shadows. A streaking shape dives and is gone in 2 seconds, Another climbs, trailing a thin wick of flame. The span keeps taking weight. By midnight, a second rhythm joins the first, the measured thump of piles for a treadway going in downstream. Engineer officers mark eddies with grease, pencil measure current plant anchors. Patrol boats nose against the flow with ropes hissing through men's hands. Steel bays knock together in the dark, one after another, a faint ring that sounds like a foundry underwater. If the main bridge fails, the river will still be crossed. That is the entire point of procedure. The east bank widens street by street. A tank halts with its nose against the tunnel mouth and idles as a barricade. Rifles flash deep in the cutting and then stop. A counterattack feels its way down from the hills, is met by artillery registered on the map grid an hour earlier, and loses its ambition in a shower of splinters and stone. When the star shells burn out, the only light is the dull orange of a barn fire toward Linz and the steady white sparks of welding torches on the west bank. Before dawn, the current carries in a shape that is not driftwood. A dark swim cap breaks the slick, then another. Someone on a guard post hears a soft clink against a pier and opens up. The river answers with a quick mean chatter from other posts. Searchlight cones rake the water and find men in rubber suits bucking the current hands working at something heavy that jerks on a rope. A boat roars from the bank and circles. By first light, the swimmers are shivering. Prisoners wrapped in blankets, their charges waterlogged and dead. Nets go up in the water by mid-morning, strung from anchored barges like a fence you cannot see until you are in it. The air war thickens with the day. Single-seat fighters slash low at the bridge, then fast twin-jet bombers ghost through at speed and drop stick after stick that walk the smoke and chew at the embankment. The deck buckles, then lies down again as if insulted. On the west bank, gun crews swap barrels and keep counting approaches aloud so nobody loses the pace. On the east bank, infantry dig deeper and string field phones into cellars where the walls do not crumble when the jets go over. Higher headquarters turns the map a few degrees and redraws plans in pencil. Traffic control points sprout like mile markers on the approaches. Light vehicles here, tanks there, ambulances off the line and straight to the aid station under the bridge. Military police with white helmets and hoarse voices carve order out of the crush. A dispatch rider roars up to the control post with a message for the armor battalion commander and does not bother to dismount. A sergeant takes the paper at a run and is back in less than a minute. The whole machine learns a new gait in hours. On the German side, the first shock drains into arithmetic. Staff officers at Corps and Army look at rail capacity, fuel on hand, batteries with ammunition, bridges that still stand north and south. Orders go out to concentrate flak to mass guns on the East Heights, to allocate any aircraft that can carry a bomb. There are words about honor and necessity, but the schedules underneath are stark too. Few trains, too little fuel, too many holes in the net. Someone suggests rockets. Within days, ballistic missiles arc toward the span from far away. The warheads land with appalling violence, but never on the bridge. They crater fields, garden plots, a hillside path, and the river rolls on as if it did not notice. Smoke makes its own weather in the gorge. Whole hours pass in a grey, artificial night where men navigate by shouted surnames and the feel of handrail rivets. Then, a gust tears the curtain and sunlight flashes on wet steel and helmets. News moves faster than vehicles. First regiment across, first artillery battalion over and laying, first tanks through to the villages beyond. A private coming west on a litter gives a thumbs up to a driver going east, and the driver laughs once sharp. Not because anything is funny, but because the line has crossed a river nobody thought would be forded alive. The span itself pays for every hour. Steel creaks, rivets work, engineers brace, patch block, and declare sections safe enough for now. The river keeps reminding everyone that it is the older power here. When a set of supporting timbers gives with a sound like a door slamming under a mountain, the crossing halts for 10 minutes that feel like an hour, while men in life vests lean out with poles and check the scoured water around the piers. Then the line starts again because it has to. By the second night, the bridgehead is no longer a dot, it is a shape with elbows and teeth. Patrols feel forward along the rail line, out to the orchards, up onto the first hunched shoulders of the Westerwald. Prisoners come in by the truckload, some still neat, most not. Officers who had promised their superiors a river defense stand on the east bank and watch American taillights disappear, up roads that were supposed to stay empty, and say nothing at all. The sentence forms behind their teeth and does not need to be spoken. Dawn brings a hard white light that shows every scar in the steel. Traffic masters wave flags in slow arcs, counting axles, judging weight by sound. The river runs high from snowmelt in the hills. A jeep with its windshield down rattles past a chalked sign that lists priorities: tanks, tank destroyers, artillery, then everything else. Far to the west, trains grind forward with more bridging, more fuel. The line never really stops. It only tightens and loosens like a lung. Orders ripple from higher up the chain. First Army pushes additional divisions toward the crossing. Corps boundary lines bend to feed the same funnel. New artillery parks on the west bank register their guns across the river, mouths and road junctions laying a web of number grids so dense that any counterattack will have to walk through fire. Forward observers climb the heights above the town, with field glasses and wire reels turning each ledge into a desk, where the day's work is simply range-bearing correction, fire for effect. The Luftwaffe keeps coming. Some days the attack profile is a stoop from high altitude. Other times it is a low, fast run that tries to throw the deck into the pilot's lap before the guns can find them. Jet bombers whisper through so quickly that the only proof they were there is the clean-edged holes they leave in the smoke and the sharp concussion seconds later on the far bank. The flak ring answers without drama, just drills repeated until the barrels smoke and the loader's thumbs are raw. Wreckage blooms in the fields and on the slopes. The span remains. On the water, the backup plan becomes its own success. A treadway bites into the current downstream, then a second. Tugs shoulder pontoon bays into place while crews walk the flexing decks with socket wrenches and wooden mallets. A Bailey Bridge's square silhouette grows panel by panel, its angles as familiar to engineer sergeants as a rifle's bolt. The river that was supposed to be a wall now offers multiple doors, and every hour another unit learns which one is theirs. East of the bridge, the ground is no longer a strip. It is a stitched-together patchwork of orchards, lanes and ridges under new ownership. Patrols feel out to the first villages on the rail line and plant signs at crossroads that did not have American names yesterday. Prisoners arrive in groups that look more like workers walking off a shift than a beaten army, dirty, hungry, silent. They look back toward the river not because they hope it will save them, but because it was meant to and did not. Headquarters on the German side turns from shock to inquiries. Reports pile up about missing demolition cord charges that fizzled, firing circuits cut by shelling or pliers orders that arrived late or contradicted each other. A tribunal convenes with a speed that signals panic more than justice. Names are read in cold rooms. One officer's career ends with a signature, another ends with a verdict that is carried out before the ink is dry. The message is meant to be deterrence. To the men on the river, it reads as confirmation that the earth has tilted. The bridge pays for its service day by day. Hairline cracks lengthen, braces are doubled, traffic is throttled to a crawl in the hottest hours of bombardment. A team in life vests mans a small boat whose only job is to circle the piers and look for the one thing nobody can afford, scour that eats at the footing under the surface. When they point, divers go over the side, and for a few minutes the war is a pair of boot soles disappearing into brown water while men on deck lean out and hold their breath. The rockets arrive. They arc in unseen from far away and announce themselves with a tearing slam that lifts dirt like a rug and flings it down slope. The aim is coarse, but the effect is brutal. Craters rimmed with torn rails, blown orchard walls, shattered windows, in houses where civilians have already learned to keep to the cellar. Men flinch at the sound, even when it lands out of sight. The bridge shudders only from the echo. Work resumes on the next breath. Units that crossed in the first days now push into the hills and across the open country. Beyond widening the cut, the way a crowbar widens a crack. Supply follows them with the indifference of a tide. Ambulances make the return trip under the same smoke that hides convoys going east. A chaplain crosses on foot with a satchel of letters and a list of names to find. Military police chalk a new sign on a wall with a single word, Ruhr. It is not a boast, it is a destination. The span has carried more than anyone would have asked of it. A week and more under blast and strain writes its own verdict. Mid-afternoon, with traffic paced and guards posted and repair crews on the steel, a rising sound turns into a failure you can feel through your boots. Rivets spit, a truss gives. The deck heaves once, twice, and a whole section folds as neatly as a closing book. Men vanish in a spray of timber, steel, and smoke. Others hang from girders, and then drop into the water, swallowed in the same second by current and debris. Boats launch without orders. Lines fly. Some are hauled out blue and coughing, some limp, some not at all. The far bank falls silent for a handful of minutes that feel like a day. Then the voices come back quieter, flatter, and the job divides itself the way it always does. Find the living mark, the lost, keep the route open on the other crossings. The river has taken back the piece of steel it wanted. The crossing itself does not stop, because the crossing is no longer one bridge. News moves as fast as rumour. In German command posts, not far away, officers hear that the great black truss at Remagen has finally fallen and feel a short involuntary surge of relief, and then they get the second sentence. Traffic is flowing on the pontoon and the black Bailey. The bridgehead is larger today than yesterday. Relief hardens into understanding. The last line was not a line at all, only a shape on a map that heavy pencils had made to look thick. Night comes again, with the same grey curtain, the same cough of generators, the same thump of boots on temporary decks that flex and hold. On a chalkboard under a tarp, a staff captain draws an arrow that turns north around a name every factory worker in Germany knows by heart. He does not say anything out loud. He does not have to. The arithmetic is visible in the arrow's bend, and in the unbroken stream of headlights heading east. Headlights thread east all night, each cone of light briefly finding the slick on a girder, the wet jacket of a sentry, the white stencil on a fuel can. Men learn the rhythm of the pontoon sway and stop noticing it. The smoke curtain drifts, and then settles in the gorge like weather that belongs here. Somewhere upstream, a barge horn moans once, and is gone. Downstream, the Bailey deck thumps under a tank destroyer and holds a note as steady as a metronome. Morning brings the tally that nobody says out loud: how many across, how much ammunition forward, how many lanes open. Field kitchens appear in places that were craters a day earlier, and ladle coffee into hands that will not stop shaking until the second cup. Staff officers walk the approaches with notebooks tucked under their arms, counting axles and marking choke points. Couriers come and go on motorcycles, their boots white with dust to the ankle, their message pouches fat with orders that redraw arrows an inch at a time. The far bank grows teeth. Outposts bite into the spurs above the rail line, and wire goes up between apple trees, whose blossoms are late in the cold. Artillery slides forward battalion by battalion and registers on the roads that run into the hills. A single heavy gun fires by the numbers from a field still furrowed from last autumn, and its shell comes down on a crossroads that staff had circled on the first day. The map and the ground begin to agree. On the other side, a different kind of work takes over. New commands arrive at brigade and regiment, concentrate guns on the east heights, dig in flak, harass the crossings until the span is gone. Pilots brief in low rooms with painted blackout windows and drink coffee that smells burnt. The luckiest talk about jets, those few machines that can knife through the smoke before the guns bracket them. The rest fly what is available and come back counting holes in their wings. After each sortie, the question that used to be asked in clipped voices is now muttered without ceremony: did it stop the traffic? The answer keeps being the same. 17 March comes hard and bright. Repairs have chased cracks for days, and bracing has multiplied until the truss looks like a skeleton wearing armour. Mid-afternoon, while a convoy paces onto the deck and engineers squat over a plate with sledges and wedges, the structure complains in a voice that demands silence. A wave rolls down the members, a buckle becomes a break, and then the middle of the bridge kneels into the river with a roar that lifts birds from every tree. Men vanish with it. Within minutes, boats are clawing the current lines, snake over the water, and hands that only an hour ago were sorting traffic are now dragging bodies into sterns, slick with fuel and mud. Helmets line up on the bank in a row that grows too quickly. The crossing does not stop. The pontoons take more weight. The Bailey becomes the main artery. A third treadway opens where the current is slightly slower and the banks are a little higher. Traffic masters rehang their chalkboards, and the white helmets of the MPs flash again in the haze as they cut a new pattern through the same crush. The bridge that fell becomes an absence you can feel, but not a gap in the plan. In the evening, a chaplain reads names into the wind on the west bank and then nods to a sergeant, and the counter on the lane opens again. Across the theatre, other rivers meet the same decision. Far to the north and west, the sky glows for nights in a row as guns cover great crossings with fire so dense that even in daylight, the smoke looks like dusk. The radio net carries names that mean different commands, but the same idea: more doors through the same wall. The effect registers on the enemy's maps as a slow collapse of alternatives. Pull flak north, starve the centre. Reinforce the centre, lose the lower crossings. Every pencil line drawn for defence now points at empty air. Units that were the first over now read new grids and drive for towns whose names are stamped on factory plates across a continent. Roads switch from lanes to highways, and the shoulders are lined with bicycles, prams, handcarts and faces that look older than their years. A tank crew that crossed at Remagen idles under poplars outside a village where the baker is already back at work. One of the crew buys a loaf that is still warm and hands half to a pair of prisoners who stare at it as if it were an artifact. Then the column moves again, because movement is the entire point. Command posts on the German side fill with paper. Reports from the river go upstairs and come back down with signatures in the margins that cannot change the arithmetic. Investigations open with a speed that looks like decisiveness and feels like fear. Names are read out for punishment. Orders of execution are carried in envelopes that still smell of fresh ink. Officers who had promised a line on the map would hold stand at a window and watch contrails stacking over the west bank and understand that the discussion has shifted from honour to survival. The dates fall into place, the way dominoes fall when the table is slightly tilted. Days after, the black truss slides under the Rhine, fresh crossings farther north and west harden into corridors. Columns from different armies feel for each other across open ground and link hands at road junctions that will be written on campaign streamers. The closure that matters most to factory workers and staff officers happens at the start of April, when two thrusts touch near Lippstadt and the basin full of blast furnaces and rolling mills becomes a pocket that cannot breathe. Radios in quiet rooms carry the news in voices, trying not to sound relieved. The men at the river hear it in a single word passed along like a password surrounded. Back along the water, the gorge echoes less each day because the gun lines have moved. The smoke generators cycle down, and the air clears to show hills that look ordinary again. A medical unit under canvas breaks down its wards and loads litters. A pontoon deck that has served beyond its expected life creaks under one more tank and then will be pulled bay by bay and sent east to where another river will need it. On a wall by the control post, someone chalks a date and a simple tally of vehicles. Nobody erases it. In rooms where maps cover every wall, officers who have been careful for years not to say what they think now speak in flat voices. It is not a speech. It is a sentence of facts: the river line crossed, the industrial heartland cut, the armies east of the crossings moving faster than rails can replace bridges. The phrase that had been unthinkable becomes a professional judgment rather than an act of despair. In the towns along the Rhine, where the trusses still stand black against the sky, men in field grey hear the same assessment in plainer words from their own seniors and pass it down in smaller rooms. It is over. The pocket closes in a day of cold sunlight and road grit. Columns that started on opposite banks of the river see each other first as radio calls, with familiar voices on unfamiliar nets, then as dust plumes, then as dots that resolve into white stars on olive drab. They link hands at a crossroads bordered by hedges and telephone poles, and the men who make the first handshake do it with the offhand look of workers finishing a shift. A staff captain marks the point on a map with a pencil dot and an arrow that curves around the basin like a lid. The lid stays. Inside the ring, factories that had been measured in production figures become landmarks for a different count. Steel that once travelled by rail now sits in cold yards under a sky braided with contrails. Airfields that were supposed to be way stations for sorties turn into landing grounds for couriers and surrender flags. Columns of prisoners form under the eye of military police, who are showing the same faces they showed at the bridge: tired, calm, relentless. Officers tell their men to keep the posture of authority, because posture is the only authority they have left. On the river line, the last habit dies hard. A Fokker wolf comes low late in the day, and the gunners on a pontoon open up with a reflex that has kept them alive for 2 weeks. Tracers arc through the smoke, and the plane banks away, trailing a line that threads itself into the evening. Men watch it go and do not cheer. They return to counting axles and checking lashings and ticking off units on a clipboard whose corners are soft from use. West of the bridgehead reserve parks empty into the roads. Tank destroyers nose past fuel bozers and ammunition trucks, each vehicle an answer to a problem that used to stop operations for days. In villages that still carry signboards with Gothic script, housewives sweep glass into neat piles while convoys pass. A boy stands on a curb, holding a wooden toy plane with one wing missing, and tracks the jets that groan northeast. A soldier throws him a square of chocolate, and the boy hesitates, looks to his mother, and then takes it. The column does not slow. In a schoolroom turned into a command post, walls chalked with grids and road nets, a major gives a weather brief that lasts exactly 90 seconds, and then points at the map. The route is clear to the next river line. The bridges there will not be intact. That is fine. Whole companies of engineers have rehearsed this in rain and mud until there was nothing left to memorize. The major says only this keep the schedule. The room answers with nods and the scrape of chairs. Outside, a generator coughs, catches and hums steady. The enemy reacts in the only ways still available. A flight of jets makes one clean run on a crossing and is swarmed by fire that walks across the sky like a metronome. A handful of self-propelled guns feel their way down from the hills and are fixed by observers whose voices stay level as they call corrections and then say the pair of words that ends arguments. Bands of infantry try the same culverts, the same hedgerows, and meet the same tripwire of registered fire. A few make it through the first line and die on the second. The effort looks brave and late in equal measure. At night, the river sounds different now. Without the heavy truss complaining, the water's own voice is louder. Men who crossed in the first rush come back for an hour and sit on ammo boxes, looking at the opposite bank as if it were a stage where the props have been struck. They talk in short sentences about people they last saw on planking that no longer exists, and then fall quiet. An engineer sergeant takes a small notebook from a breast pocket and writes 3 surnames on a page where the dates already run in a short, tight column. He closes the book and puts it away as if it were a tool. Far behind the line, a rail yard fills with flat cars loaded with bridging they will not need here. The detail that lashed every bay and checked every pin now reverses the process chain by chain, mallet by mallet. A corporal wipes grease on a rag and says to no one in particular that the next river will be smaller. He does not sound hopeful. He sounds like a man who has studied maps. In rooms where the furniture has been pushed against the walls to make space for folding tables, staff officers on the other side hold meetings that are shorter each day. Reports from the Ruhr have too many numbers in the wrong columns. Fuel receipts do not match the sorties they need. Replacement battalions arrive with boys whose voices have not deepened. Someone mentions throwing what is left into a final counterstroke to split a corridor. The idea hangs in the air and then drops like a tool from a hand that has lost its grip. The men who were ordered to hold the river do not talk much about bridges anymore. They talk about roads and prisoners and where the bread will come from tomorrow. One captain takes down a wall map and rolls it into a tube with careful hands, more from habit than hope. He ties it with string and sets it on a chair. Another officer comes in with a dispatch and does not set his hat down. They read the lines in silence and both look at the chalk mark on the wall where the front was supposed to stop. The chalk is faint now. The river was the last heavy line. The rest is paper. On the west bank, under a tarp stretched over saplings, a clerk files a report that runs to 2 pages. Traffic totals damage to the Bailey panels, hours of generator fuel, remaining names of men recommended for decorations. He lines his ruler along the bottom and draws a clean line, then signs his name and the time. When he looks up, the crossing lights have been hooded again, and the gorge is a dark throat breathing smoke. He gathers the papers, folds them into a pouch, and walks them to a captain who glances once and tucks them under his arm. The captain steps out into the night and hears nothing except the low, endless roll of tires on steel. Across the theatre word spreads the way it always does, in fragments and repetitions: the river crossed, the heartland cut, the kiln of the war banked down to coals. In some places men say the lines aloud. In others, they keep the thought behind their teeth. It does not matter whether the sentence is spoken or only understood. The meaning is the same in headquarters and on riverbanks, on factory floors gone silent, and on decks that flex and hold. The last promise had been a line on a map. The map has been walked through.